Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mike Ganji. I'm the co-chair of the PGA East Employment Committee, along with Jamie Kosanki. We focus on creating events for producers that build tools and skills to help find new employment and networking opportunities. Tonight, this event that you joined, we have a super fun and informative panel for you with award-winning animation and visual effects producers who feel passionately that their field is expanding and need more qualified producers to come over to the genre.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Kosanki, Mike's co-chair. And again, we're so happy that you could be here tonight and that tonight the PGA opened this event to the Visual Effects Society, Women in Animation, and Rise Up Animation. So we'll jump into the discussion quickly after some housekeeping. Tonight, if you have any technical concerns or want to share your thoughts with colleagues, we encourage you to use the chat feature. Following the hour discussion, we'll allow time for questions. So please use the Q&A feature and we will monitor that. And now let's start the show. I'd like to introduce our moderator, chair of the Visual Effects Society, founder of Green Ray Media, and producer at Tippett Studios, Lisa Cook.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. I'd just like to next talk to you about our esteemed panel, introduce our esteemed panel. Jinko Gotoh is an Oscar-nominated producer and consultant for the animation industry with a long line of credits. She is currently producing her second animation feature for Netflix, and she serves as the vice president of the Women in Animation. She's also a member of AMPUS, where she represents diversity and inclusion on various committees. Beyond that, she's the PGA's co-lead of the BIPOC Working Group for Animation and Visual Effects. Monica Lago-Kaytis is an animation producer who just made her live action debut with Netflix feature film, The Christmas Chronicles with Kurt Russell. It marks her first feature of her newly created production company, Frogbot Films, which is actively developing existing and original properties for live action and animation production. She's also co-founder of Rise Up Animation. Arnon Manor is Vice President of Visual Effects at Sony Pictures. He's also an independent filmmaker, writer, producer, and director. His recent credits include co-directing and co-producing the Netflix animated short film, Cops and Robbers. And if you haven't seen it, you should. It's awesome. He's also on the Visual Effects Society Board of Directors and chairman of our Education Committee, which is promoting diversity through outreach and mentorship programs. Phillip Wolff. Phillip Wolff is a VFX Executive Producer at DNEG with an impressive line of credits spanning over more than a decade in the industry. He broke into the world of television, working on HBO's multi-award-winning Game of Thrones, and he's since carried this role through to numerous feature films. He's also on our board of directors, and he's the co-chair of the Montreal section and co-chair of our Health and Wellness Committee, which brings health and wellness resources to our membership. So it's really an honor to be here with this esteemed panel tonight. So this has been an unprecedented year with COVID for the entire entertainment industry. I guess my question is, first to you, Jinko, what is the current state of the animation industry and how has it been affected by COVID?
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, PGA, for hosting this panel. I think we're in a very, very grateful place with the animation and VFX. I'll let my VFX colleagues speak about VFX, but I think, we're one of the rare industries that was able to continue to work through COVID. And as you know, over the past several years, the streaming business has really upped the number of content that is necessary. And so the demand has been greater than ever. And the fact that we've been able to work virtually has allowed these productions to continue even through COVID.
So has there been any change in the way people are working? I know a lot of people are working at home, and how has that impacted? Monica, you want to answer this part? How has that virtual working from home, how has that impacted the industry?
Well, it's a great question. And, I was at Disney for like 23 years, and I left in, I think it was 2017. So not that long ago, but we were starting to really do a lot of kind of work from home stuff where we would try to give people the opportunity to take a day. And it was, it was kind of a slow thing to get going, because there is a great belief that if you're not in the same room collaborating, you're going to be missing some stuff. And I think that there's a little bit of truth in that. But what we have found with COVID is that we're making these full features from our homes. So, there are some challenges with getting all the equipment, but the productions have been amazing. My husband's working on a project right now with WildBrain and Apple Plus, and they've set him up, and he's basically been directing 2 animated TV specials from our garage. We don't have enough room in the house. So I think it's been great. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's going where we were starting to go to, with the idea that you could kind of work anywhere and we could get talent from all over the world. And now with COVID, it put it in place. It's one of those things where it's the most horrible thing that could have probably happened to all of us, the pandemic, but it did bring to light the ability that you can do animation. And I think there's a lot of folks from live action and different disciplines that have looked at us and maybe thought, well, wow, now I want to get into that, because that is something you can do, when a lot of the live action sets were shut down.
Have there been challenges? I mean, are people as productive at home, and how has it changed your pipeline?
I think, we've looked at different ways of working, because the working model has changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're doing this all virtually. So I think, there was definitely a lot of Zoom fatigue when we started, because we had to all learn how to work on Zoom. But it's definitely for me, especially with my production, because we were already doing a lot of virtual production work, collaborating with artists from all around the globe, that it did allow us a better collaboration, because we had to change how we work. So rather than having story meetings and art department meetings that was siloed, we started thinking, how do we make sure that that all the departments know what's going on? And so we started really thinking, how do we collaborate in a different way, so that people can obtain the same amount of information or more. And we're finding out that our collaboration is stronger because we are working virtually. So there's an upside that we didn't realize that we could create.
Have you had to adapt your pipeline, the technologies you're using to?
Yes, I mean, obviously, we've brought in lots of tools. So for editorial, we're using Evercast to do editorial reviews. Zoom works for certain things. Google Hangout works for certain things. Then there's all kinds of other applications that we're using.
People are using Teams as well. And so a lot of the playback, sorry, not to interrupt, but I just wanted to add to you, Jinko, because she's right on. It's a lot of like playback. I think the thing that's been difficult not difficult, but when you're trying to record talent, mm-hmm. and they can't go into a place. So a lot of people have been having to go and record in their closets, and, just doing we're just really scrappy, we're just doing mm-hmm. things that you wouldn't always do. I think, looking at final color, you have to make sure you have the right color calibrated monitor. If they can bring that in for a director and install it, or a lighting supervisor, awesome. Sometimes you do have to go in once in a while and like listen to certain things. If you're not releasing in a theater, you don't have to be thinking about sound in quite the same way you would as if you're releasing something on a streamer where people are going to listen to maybe 5.1 in their home. So there are definitely things to be thinking about, but I feel like people are like, they're all over it. Luckily, we've had enough tools for a while that mm-hmm. people are just utilizing those and pulling them in.
Great. So Arnon, I just want to ask you about the visual effects side of the industry from a studio perspective. How has COVID impacted visual effects, and how have you adapted?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think there was, when COVID first hit, a little earlier than a year from today, there was a big concern about what would happen. Obviously, you know, some productions did shut down. Some productions that were supposed to go didn't go. But we had, and I think it's true for every single studio, you know, there was a lot of productions that were already in post-production or just about to start post-production. I would say that the visual effects community worldwide, and we work with VFX vendors, you know, around the globe, rallied, I would say within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they all converted to remote working. I mean, it was a huge undertaking that involved getting artists and other production personnel working from home, security concerns, obviously, about being able to stream and work on, you know, sensitive studio material, the back and forth. And I have to say from my perspective, and I think everybody in the visual effects industry, similar to animation, you know, the conversion from working, you know, in the brick and mortar to then working virtually was really smooth. There was a little bit of a, you know, downside, I'd say, you know, maybe 25, maybe 30% slowdown in the first few weeks, just as people got used to it. But then actually the efficiency went up. So from our perspective, we didn't stop. You know, we had productions that were ongoing. Filing shots and looking at stuff at 2K was more of an issue. But, you know, we had, whether it's for executives or directors, you know, we had 4K monitors shipped, color calibrated to their homes with the right tool sets. I mean, it was a military operation, and it worked really well. So, I mean, hats off to all the visual effects vendors. I mean, literally within, it seemed like it was magic, but I know there was a lot of people obviously in the back rooms trying to make it work.
Right. And
Yeah.
Philip, you're a vendor, so how, from your perspective, how was it? Did COVID affect you, and what's the state of the industry today?
First of all, thank you for having me here. Very appreciated. And like Arnon said, it's magic. The magic is the technology teams for the visual effects vendors around the world. For the company I'm with, DNEG, it literally meant getting 6,500 employees to work from home within 2 weeks. And I don't know how, but our tech team pulled it off. And this included people without internet at home. So it's crazy. And from a production perspective, within a visual effects vendor, I would say the beginning definitely had a huge impact on everyone. Everyone was uncertain. Everyone didn't know where it's going to be. Nobody, but this is not specific to our industry. But we saw how efficiency started to pick up again. So we saw how artists actually were able to focus on being artists. We also realized that production had a lot more work to do because all communication suddenly became active. Hence, it was before passive sometimes because you just passed by an artist's desks on your way to the supervisor. This doesn't happen anymore because you need to actively engage via Zoom or a tool of choice. So it really changed the daily life for production quite a bit, and it made it quite harder to get the information you need. So I would say from an artist perspective, it definitely helped. From a production perspective, it made the world a little bit harder, and a little bit is a bit understated. And like Arnon was saying, we were lucky that we had a lot of projects in post-production, and those held up and held us busy for quite a while. But as nothing was shooting, or no new plates were turned over, even shows which were already completed in principal photography, which were waiting for a DI vendor to turn over the plates. This didn't happen because the DI vendor wasn't in the facility. So you definitely realized the gap. You definitely realized how there was a decrease in available work to us. And a lot of visual effects vendors have used this opportunity to rethink a little bit what they're doing, how they're doing. Also to step further into virtual production, also to look at feature animation, because hey, look at that, feature animation kept going the whole time. Actually, it got more and more work. So there are more and more visual effects vendors looking into feature animation now and animated TV shows. It's very exciting.
You know,
The opportunity given.
Yeah.
you know, I would say that that is, it's so accurate, because when I think back on what we were trying to accomplish with Frogbot Films, because we had, you know, we've done animation for years, my partner and myself, and then we did the live action film, and we were trying to get stuff out for both, and we were trying to sell some live action scripts, but because they were traveling, or if they weren't being done on a soundstage, there was just, people didn't want to buy. It was like, let's put a pin in that and we'll come back later when COVID passes. So it's definitely been, I'm imagining, you know, luckily we had the animation stuff going, but if you don't have that, so I think that's a big piece of why we wanted to do this, because we wanted to let people know that there is, right, the ability to be doing something like this, animation, visual effects, very similar. So we definitely wanted to demystify that too at some
And
point.
then one thing I just want to add before we get into another subject is what COVID, you know, COVID gave us obviously a lot of bad things in the world. The communication level, I think, actually has increased. One thing that I've noticed, you know, in my position, working with many people around the world, different vendors, is that we would, you know, the communication would be via email for the most part. And then when people came to town, which didn't happen that often. Whereas these days, I actually have a lot more Zoom meetings with people more often. And so more frequent meetings with people that I would normally have maybe once a year, once every 2 years, when they come to town from another country. And if our schedules aligned, now we can actually easily schedule it anytime. So communication actually has become better with people from around the world. That's one thing that it has given us.
And
the
to
weird
add
thing
to
is we had
Arnon's
the
note, I
tool
think
before.
the beauty that's come out of this is that we've really truly globalized as an industry,
Yes.
where now everyone can, you know, reach each other on Zoom and not have to wait to get on a plane, or, you know, and it's given opportunities for artists around the globe to be able to work in this industry. So I think that's a really positive note in terms of getting talent, because I mean, the demand for both animation and visual effects is huge, right? When you think about how the industry has really grown over the last 10 years. So it's given opportunities for talent all around the globe to be able to work now, because we are working on Zoom.
And people have asked if they think we're ever going to, like, are we going to go back to going into, and when they ask me that, I'm like, well, if it were up to me, I would like to maybe go in twice a week, you know, and you know, for pivotal moments where we need to be together, but I'd still like to be able to have that flexibility of having people be able to work from their homes if they want to. Some people
Right.
don't feel as productive, but
Yeah, that was my next question. Do you think we will go back to the way it was, or are these changes here to stay? And is that a good thing? Is it not a good thing? I mean, I know it was probably challenging for people when their children were home, but now that kids are getting back into school, is this new model here to stay? Anybody?
I think it's definitely here to stay, and I think it will be a life choice, right?
Mhm.
Are you more effective going in, or are you more effective staying at home? And I think, you know, I think employers are open to that flexibility, because we want to give everyone a quality of life, at the same time be effective at what they do. So
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just talking to a few VFX vendors, you know, who had those vendors that had, you know, a lot of prime real estate, especially in, you know, central areas of town, very expensive. I think it's going to be some sort of hybrid model. I think some artists work better at home. Some artists need the daily interaction. On the visual effects side, you know, we're going to need to continue having reviews, and especially when we're talking about feature projects, seeing the shots and the work projected. So I think that there's going to be some sort of combination, you know, where I think where there's an efficiency to be had, especially in terms of a vendor side and reducing their overhead, that's going to happen. I can see that happening quite a lot.
mhm.
And it's also going to be an opportunity for retention of senior talent, because the more and more people age and grow out of the industry, out of the animation and visual effects industry, and they want to focus on their life. They want to focus on their family. The more and more the question came, can I work from XYZ close to my parents in Spain? I don't know. And the answer till last March basically has always been no, because working from home for visual effects was unthinkable. It was, I think, if it wasn't for this pandemic, working from home would have not been on the table for at least another 5 years. So it's definitely the good and the bad, which it opened it up. And I totally agree. I think it will be a hybrid situation. We will have people working. We will have people still need to relocate to locations because of tax credits and labor laws and tax law reasons. But there might be hybrid systems of, okay, I don't know, 200 days of the year you spend your time there, and the rest of the year you spend your time wherever you think fits.
As long as you can get your work done. I mean, honestly, a lot of us, folks who only have worked in live action and don't know animation don't realize how many hours that we actually spend. We know that people hear stories about how long you're on set and such, but the hours are very long in animation. And so to be able to work in your home, I just said to be able to twice, does give that flexibility, because you can have dinner with your family and then continue to work, because that's what it's always been. It's 9 to midnight, what have you, sometimes till 4 a.m.
So clearly, animation and visual effects have been able to adapt to the new normal with COVID, unlike live action where you have to be on the set around other people. So what are the differences between animation, visual effects, and live action production, and what skills are transferable from live action? If I'm a live action producer and I'm thinking I want to get into these other fields where I can work at home and have an adaptable work situation if there's another pandemic, let's say, what are the transferable skills?
Can I just go first just to say how similar they are, and then someone else will take the transferable skills, because
Sure.
I think they are. But first, I just want to make sure people are really clear that visual effects and animation are the same. They're just, one is a full feature, the entire thing is animated, and it's the style of it. So it can be much more cartoony and not photorealistic, which visual effects is generally almost always been photorealistic to begin with, because they were putting in effects into live action films. But now, of course, we're even seeing that change with things like The Lion King, which is, it's all animated, whether it's done, there might be, I think everything's in the computer. I'm not even sure that you actually have live action backgrounds, like, plates or not, but it's very similar. So, and it's also similar in the sense of live action, because, and somebody put in one of the questions, the Q&A, they were talking about the terms are very similar, and it's true. We have the same things happening. They're just done slightly different, right? You have locations or you build a set. We're building everything in the computer, or we're drawing it or painting it by hand. But, and we should go through that, because I think that's what makes it so kind of exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So does someone else want to talk about the transferable?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's lots of transferable skills. I mean, I think as a producer, it's about filmmaking and storytelling. And so working closely with your director and making sure that you can fulfill her the vision of the director. And so it's working with the studios, working with the writers, working with the cast, working with the department heads, working with the editors. So I think those skills are very, very transferable. In terms of how you budget and schedule, it's obviously very different because of the medium is different. But, I think at the producing level, I truly believe those skills are very transferable, and it's filmmaking. And so it's a different pipeline, and learning that pipeline takes time, but it's not like it's a mystery.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree on sorry, Philip, you want to go?
And funny enough, there, if you see it from a classical film set, you see your props department, your set building, your lighting, your grip, your special effects, your DP. This is all existence in animation and visual effects as well. It's just called layout, environment, lighting, visual
Character animation.
effects, character animation, creature effects. It's just a different name for it, but this department still exists. And instead of someone actually taking a hammer and nails, you have someone sitting at a computer using a tool like Maya, Houdini, 3ds Max,
SketchUp,
and whatsoever to create these environments. And planning those people and scheduling those people, budgeting those people, working with those people, and leading those people to a successful project is very, very similar. It's just a different language.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree. I think and all four of us here, and we've talked a lot about that terminology, that term transferable skills, and in regards to kind of producing and everything that falls under producing, because it's not just to produce a movie or produce a visual effects movie. There's countless other producing categories, from production management and coordination and PAing, and then within the different departments that Philip was talking about, there are those categories you have to produce. If you have a large either animated movie or a visual effects movie, and you have a department of rigging where you rig the characters, then for the most part, if it's a big movie, those riggers need to be managed in some way. So there's probably a coordinator or a production manager who is responsible for making sure that all the rigging is done correctly. And that can go down to every single department within the animation and visual effects. And if you think about movie making, where when you're on set, you're not shooting the entire movie in one go, you're shooting it in shots and takes. It's exactly the same thing. So if we're doing a visual effects movie, we're adding obviously a visual effects and digital components to shots that were shot and specific takes. If we're doing animation, then you're actually recreating the entire frame from scratch, but you're still creating singular shots to then be combined within the big kind of quilt that is the movie. So again, the transferable skills are very, very, very similar. It's about the mindset. It's kind of like, I liken it to kind of driving a car. Once you know how to organize, how to coordinate, how to bring people together, how to schedule, how to budget. You might not know exactly the terminologies because they're a little different, like driving, stick to automatic.
Right, but you learn it. I mean,
you
people
can learn it, exactly.
learn it.
So those are the things that are very, very, very transferable. And just to kind of jump ahead, I think if everybody listening can gauge very quickly that both in the animation and visual effects industries, there is a need for production personnel. There is a need for artists.
All levels.
For this particular panel, in terms of the PGA, there is a need for production personnel at all levels, entry level to the highest level.
Can I just go a little bit deeper for those who are producers who are on, or aspiring producers who are going, well, can you give us a little bit more specific? So when you think about your film, right? Pre-production, we have pre-production where you're doing artwork, inspiration, you have an art department, we potentially call it visual development, it's the same thing. You're doing your art, you start having, you have a script, hopefully. Usually in live action, you definitely have a script. In animation, the beauty is, because it's a longer process, you want to have a script, but it changes a lot. So it iterates a lot, but you have stories happening, right? Storyboards, it's the same thing. Now people are starting to do more boarding and story for sequences in live action. We did it on the Christmas Chronicles. You have previs or pre-visualization of stuff. That was a tongue twister. We do that for certain sequences. We do that for everything in animation. You have your actors, you have people that are building sets. We actually have a layout department. We have our character animators who are our actors, even though we're recording actual talent, So there's just a lot of things that are very, very similar, but the thing that you have to keep in mind is that live action is a lot quicker. So you can do an entire film in a year, we did it start to finish, pre-production, through post and release. In animation, it doesn't happen because animation is it's done by hand, right? It's all about the people working for you. You can have 300 people, if not more, sometimes on a show, and it can be 2 years to 5 years because there is so much that needs to be done. It's a very laborious process, and that's not a bad thing, but it is what it is.
And it is a linear process, but I think what's happened with technology is that we are turning into where we can work virtually, and virtual production, I think, is more akin to how live action is shooting. So on my show, for example, we are creating a situation where we can all work virtually, where our department heads are all coming into a virtual environment to make those key decisions, much like in live action. The traditional animation pipeline was a very linear process where each step got completed, and it wasn't a collaborative process like live action. But with virtual production, that's changing. And I think, especially with virtual production, we're going to be looking for production people that have live action experience and VFX experience or animation experience, because you need both for them to be successful working in virtual production. So that even closes the gap even further in terms of bringing people from the Producers Guild or production personnel wanting to get involved in animation and VFX.
There's like Arnon said, there are so many more roles in animation for management personnel to make their way up to producers, whereas on the live action side, you have all these departments, and you might have someone like a PA or someone, but they're trying to learn how to be, like, if they're in the camera department, they're doing the slates and stuff because they want to be a camera operator potentially. They may not want to be a producer. And so, you have those roles, but it's more people who want to do that. They want to be a location person, or they want to build or do the special effects. Whereas in animation, you can be in all these different departments as a production person and make your way up to become a producer. So there's a lot of room. I think that's why we do find that people that come from live action really love the culture and love animation. And I just want it to also be the same way the other direction, where when people from animation go to live action, they're looked at as the valuable individual they are, because it's very hard to make an animated movie as well.
Yeah, what I would just, if people haven't done this recently, I'm a big fan of just staying till the end of the credits, much to the chagrin of my kids when they were younger and would go to the movies with me. I'm like, no, we have to stay and, pay attention to who worked on it. But I think if you look at the credit list, especially on any movie that had live action movie that had a significant amount of visual effects, certainly any animated movie, and just look at the different departments, that will give you just some insight as to the different categories. And because that'll immediately, it's the first step where you'll see, oh, I didn't know that this job potentially existed. So just pay attention to that, or go on IMDb and check out the, hundreds of different roles, and then take your pick.
So if a live action producer wants to cross over to visual effects or animation, what would you suggest they do? Is there biases in the business against live action producers? Or if you are looking at a bunch of resumes and you see animation producer, and then you see live action, are you going to weigh one differently, or are you going to look at everything equally? Or what do they need to learn? What is that road like over the crossover on that bridge?
Can I start on that quickly? Sure. I would say my opinion in my role at the studio level, I don't hire individuals for in the vendors, right? So I tend to deal with VFX producers and executive producers and supervisors and people that interact from the vendor with the studio. But I used to work for vendors for a big part of my career. But I would say that anybody who wants to make the transition from live action into either animation or visual effects producing, I would say start within a vendor. It's like working, again, give the example of a car. It's like if you want to learn the mechanics of a car, go and work in a garage. So go and work in a facility and learn the basics of what it takes. And most facilities do, visual effects facilities in animation, I'm assuming as well, do literally from A to Z in terms of the pipeline. So that's what I would say, that transition, even though eventually you might want to be a visual effects producer on the production side, I would say the value that you'd get from actually working within a facility for several years and getting the experience and kind of just knowing the definitions and the lingo and the time that it takes, that will be invaluable if you then want to make a transition back into physical production, but as a visual effects producer, for example, or coordinator or production manager.
I completely agree with you, Arnold. I think what's important is to learn the craft, whether it's visual effects or animation. You need to learn the craft of what it takes to become part of the production team. Another way in terms of a producer is that obviously, if you have an IP or create content that you can partner with animation savvy producer, that is a way that a live action producer could come in and work together to learn the process. But otherwise, I think you need to learn the craft. Coming into a facility is a great example in terms of learning the ropes.
And when you come into a facility, what we usually look at is what is your experience? What's your experience level? You might be a producer at the moment, or you're a manager, line producer at the moment. We look at how much knowledge do you have about visual effects. The more proactive you are, the more you already read into it, the better it is. When you get into an interview, you will most likely be asked questions like, okay, what is the pipeline look like? What does a visual effects pipeline look like? And there are books out there, internet websites, YouTube, which gives you this information. And with this information in hand and with showing you have the expertise of leading a team, of making sure A is at B when it needs to be there, you already have a really good starting point. But what most of the times happens is that they say, okay, let's move you one level down to learn the craft before you actually get the
top position,
the responsibility which comes with the position. Because as a visual effects producer on vendor side, which by the way, a visual effects producer on vendor side and a visual effects producer on studio side are also two different jobs. Mm-hmm. The visual effects producer on vendor side is responsible for budget, quality, and the timely delivery of a given portion of the visual effects work. If you work at a company like DNEG, for example, you most likely end up with the whole movie to oversee, and you work with a visual effects producer on studio side very closely together, but you're basically responsible for the visual effects production of that movie. So if you come in and you don't have this visual effects experience, this visual effects language in you, they very likely not going to give you the responsibility and the to actually hold that. So you're likely going to go in at a production manager level, if not a level below, because a production manager, for example, within visual effects vendor is the one who schedules the whole show. So you need to understand the intricate things of the production pipeline. How long does something take? How does bidding work? What does it mean if layout is delayed for everything else coming afterwards? And just as an example, where Monica and Jinko were talking about animation productions going over years, we all know post period of our movies is like 30 weeks or whatever. So you have a visual effects movie which has a post period of 30 weeks, but you have work of 2, 3, 4 years in there. My biggest project I've produced as a visual effects producer had 1,500 artists working on it. So it very quickly becomes very big. And my immediate production team was 36 people. That's just the immediate production team, not the department production people. So it's huge, and there's so much content being produced right now. So there's this huge opportunity of getting into this.
Yeah, and going back to the very beginning of your question, Lisa, when you had the example of when you're looking at these resumes, I think it differs from a studio hire for a producer for let's say Disney or Pixar or what have you, versus more of an independent situation. I think studios tend to want to hire the person with the most experience, but they're not opposed to bringing someone in and saying, like Arnon mentioned or Philip mentioned, and Jinko, and teaching that other person. So you come in and for that first show, you ride alongside or you do a different role so that you can see what's happening and better understand it. Not that different from live action. I mean, when I went over, I was producing just like the other producers, you know, and in live action, you have so many more producers. When you look at the credits, there's a ton, right? Executive producers and a ton of producers. You don't really have that. You don't have that in animation. You have usually one or two producers, usually one, and multiple directors. And that's because that producer is dealing with, you know, the creative piece to an extent. They're dealing with the writer and the director, making sure, as Jinko mentioned, that vision is coming to pass. They're making sure the talent's all happy. They're kind of that cheerleader at the top level of the entire thing, which is very similar to your on-set producers, right? But I was told, you know, you shouldn't have a producer credit yet because you haven't done this before. So I was considered an executive producer, even though I was on set every single day. So I think, you know, it happens on both sides. No one is going to really let you come in and for the very first show give you, right, everything, because they don't want to set you up to fail. But I do think if someone wants to come in, the thing they should do is apply and try to come in, or if they have their own IP, like Jinko said, the best thing you can do is get together with a seasoned animation producer and go from there. And that's really what we do on the other side. When we as animation producers want to do live action, that's why there's so many producers. You will have someone who specializes, or maybe they were an AD before. And so then they become a producer. So they're really kind of that type of producer who's there on set dealing with all of that, you know, movie magic and all of the schedule type stuff, which is quite different from animation because that's your line producer or your PM who's dealing with all that. So they exist. They're just might be called something slightly different.
Yeah, the other thing, just to add to that, you know, there is, I wouldn't say there's a shortage, but maybe that there is. You know, I think there's a boom in animation and visual effects for sure. You know, COVID obviously had slowdown in the entire world. But, you know, as Jinko said, in the last several years, because of the boom in streaming and the size of the streamers and the amount of content that those streamers are producing, not just buying from other studios, but actually now producing themselves globally, worldwide. This is a worldwide thing. I kind of joke about it and I say, you know, you can, if you have any knowledge in animation and visual effects, and I say this to, you know, we deal a lot with education and young people, and, you know, if you have any semblance of wanting to work in animation and visual effects, you can more or less take your pick of where you want to work in the world and go and work there and find a job in that place, because it is very, very sought after. So that's also something to consider. You know, Philip now is in Montreal, and, you know, we know that right now Montreal is the Wild West of visual effects, specifically, where there's so much, because of tax credits, there's so much going through Montreal that the vendors there actually can't keep up with the demand and hire people fast enough. So I think there's certainly a need. So anybody you know, who really is eager to make the transition, there are also a bunch of tools. You know, there's books that you can read, there's courses that you can take. We're doing a lot of kind of mentorship, and we can maybe talk about doing something with a PGA that's a little bit more specific, not just, you know, more general. But there is certainly a need for visual effects production personnel. And I say that it's not just producers, it's production personnel from the top down. You know, whether you have a small amount of experience and you want to come in at the PA level, you know, and all the way up to actually producing either visual effects, animation, there is a huge demand. So if anybody is having an issue with employment, or is thinking about, you know, the next stage in their career, or trying something different, if you get into animation and visual effects, you know, I don't want to guarantee anything, but I think you have a very, very good choice of being employed. if you have transfer those skills that you have.
As
And I was going to add, especially if you're outside of LA, there's just so much work globally that I have a show based right now in New York, and my co-producer was a studio executive who had one animated movie he oversaw many years ago. My production manager came from gaming. My editorial production supervisor was a filmmaker. So, I have 3 out of 5 people in my production team that came out of live action or gaming and did not have animation background, but I hired them because of curiosity, the fact that they can lead and manage people and are strong communicators. So those are the basic skills that I'm looking for, and really the curiosity, wanting to learn and be hungry to learn, because we're always looking for ways to be more effective and efficient at how we work. And I think my production team on my film has really allowed us to work virtually because we were thinking outside of the box. And as the demand continues, our process is going to evolve because the demand is so high that, we're always looking for smarter, better ways of working. And so, I welcome live action people coming into our industry.
Philip, do you have a comment?
Oh, I just wanted to pick up on Arnon bringing up Montreal. Montreal's industry, just as an example for visual effects and growth and what's happening. When I moved to Montreal about 5.5 years ago, I want to say the visual effects industry in Montreal was maybe 1,500 people strong, maybe a bit more. And now we're over 6,500 people in Montreal alone. We have, I just guesstimate, at least 10 visual effects producer roles being looked for different vendors, and guessing about 50, 60 other production roles to fill. This is just Montreal. And if we get all the artists we need for all the projects which are coming, then we will need more production personnel, because someone needs to keep the creatives in the realm, right? So there's so much opportunity, and the higher the level is, so usually coordinator, production manager upwards, companies also take care of your work permits for a country like Canada, for example. And there's also, if you are located in Los Angeles, you have Vancouver.
Right. I was just going to say, it's really important for people to realize, though, when it comes to, if you're a production assistant or a coordinator in regular animation, visas are very hard to get. You have to be at a higher level to come to the United States to do stuff like that. I can't speak for other countries, but I've had a lot of people asking about that, and we can talk about that later. But I did want to go back to two things. One, going back to the initial question, like, is there bias? I can't really speak for, is there bias? I mean, I would love to hear from live action people that came to animation, because I have been told by them, the ones that I've worked with have said, oh, I felt like I was welcomed with open arms. And I think that's because we, as animation filmmakers, we all grew up watching animated movies, but also so many live action movies, right? And TV. So we know that that's a legitimate medium. I think I can only speak for my experience going from animation to live action. I did feel a lot of bias, but granted, it was one team and a studio, and they verbalized things that definitely felt like they had no clue about how animation was done. And like, they act like it's, oh, you make cartoons, you don't actually make films. So I do think that's something we need to, it does happen, it shouldn't. And it's something that I think people need to be aware of. I'm definitely going to verbalize it, because if you don't talk about it, you can't get through it. The other thing I wanted to mention, because we're talking about mentorship programs, is that the Rise Up Animation, which I'm one of the co-founders of, we do offer industry advice to people who are over 18 that identify as BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, or a person of color. You can sign up with us, and if you're just curious and you just want some general industry advice, you can always sign up every month, and you'll get a mentor that's within the animation, an animation professional, and they can give you information. So that might be something for some of you who are watching to look into.
As
Great.
well as Rise Up Women in Animation also have a very large mentoring program. We just launched our program yesterday to really help women of color, to mentor them. And we had close to 7,000 applicants yesterday, so.
Yeah, and I would say and obviously on the visual effects side, you know, Lisa and Philip, but also Monica and Jinko, we should, you know, I want to think practically, we should put our heads together about actually doing some sort of panel or some sort of mentoring system where people that do want very, you know, more specific information about how to do their own personal transferable skills, you know, where we can come up with some sort of mentoring platform for that. But I would say the first thing, just that all the people that I hear and listening and thinking, okay, I might want to do this. I'm seeing some of the questions and it's like, how do I, you know, get into this? I would say, look at your experience and look at what you've done and think to yourself, what is the qualities that you have, what qualifications you have, what professional qualities you have in the job that you've been doing. And it could be that you've been, I don't know, producing unscripted content. I don't know, something that seems really far remote from what we do. But again, it's about the mindset of how you approach that, and especially on the producing side or the production management side. So I would do that first and foremost. Look at the skill sets that you have, everything that you've done up to now, and try and imagine how can that be transferable in your view to a specific company or a specific production aspect of either visual effects or animation. Most visual effects companies, I can speak for that, I'm assuming animation as well. If you go on their websites, most of them would have a contact page, and most of them will have a, you know, jobs search page, because most of them are looking for jobs. And I would just say, reach out, you know, reinvent your resume, and don't hide what you've done just because you haven't done animation or visual effects, because that is the experience that you have. But emphasize that the skill set that you have, you think can be transferable because of X, Y, Z. So I would do that.
That's a great point, because I mentor people on how to do their resumes, specifically, you know, because we don't have portfolios as production management personnel or producers. And I always say to them, like, people can come from communications background, theater, film, you know, psychiatry, you know, you could have been a teacher. Like, there's no, as long as you are super, you know, organized and you want to facilitate and help people, like, it's just in the blood, you know.
There's literally, it's, if you think you might be right, you might likely be right for this position. There's literally for everyone. And a very extreme example, I've seen producers be a production assistant 4 years ago. So the time to rank up in visual effects, if you have the right mindset, is also very right. Sure, there come a little bit other skills you might not be able to get over 4 years, but it's a possibility. And the timing is right now. Right now, there's this huge demand in people. Right now, every company is looking for people. Right now, there's so much happening, especially on the animation front, and especially on the virtual production front, which is kind of rethinking of how filmmaking actually is approached. Because we have tools like we use VR to be in one room to talk with the DP who is in New York, and the director's in LA, and the production designer is in Wellington. Awful time zones to organize, but you have these possibilities now. And that's just one thing of virtual production. Everyone keeps hearing these LED stages they built for Mandalorian, which gives you the possibility of having visual effects in camera. These things are happening and moving part of post-production into prep. So we need people for that as well. You have other technologies where when you're more on set and more on location, you actually put visual effects into your camera and you see it, but also this needs to be organized. You need a completely new unit on set. And we need people for that as well. So there's so much demand right now, and there's so much offset of how we've done things earlier. It's constantly reinventing itself. And it's just, I personally find it super exciting every day.
Hey. So there is an interesting question that came up in the questions. What is the valuable advice or the lessons you've learned on your path? How did you get to where you are in the current stages of your career? Anybody want to take that one on? Have you received any help?
I'll start because I think just, you know, I've had a very interesting career. I think, Lisa, you know it, you know, which is not very common, but I think it shows to, you know, what I consider to be transferable skills. You know, I'm now vice president of visual effects at Sony, so I'm a suit for all intent and purposes, and I manage, you know, the visual effects. But I come from a creative. I used to be an artist, so I actually went to art school. I got into visual effects, you know, in the early 90s when we had to, you know, chisel away at how to make things. But I approached it from a visual effects artist, and I moved to America and realized actually I was interested in filmmaking. I made a switch over to producing a couple of really terrible live action independent features. I wouldn't, you know, wish my worst enemy to watch them, but the experience of doing them was incredible. And
You're gonna put the names in the chat for us to watch them?
Look at my IMDb, you'll be able to see them. So they're way at the bottom. But no, what I'm saying is, you know, I made a very definitive switch of my own because I enjoyed, even though I love visual effects and being an artist, I loved filmmaking. So I took the leap and went out and just learned how to produce a couple of independent features, and I did that. And then somebody came to me and said, hey, you used to be a visual effects guy, and now you're producing, can you VFX produce? I'm like, I think so. I mean, I have both skill sets, and I switched over to becoming a visual effects producer, and all the time, obviously, being a filmmaker and creating my own content. But I did that switch, and then that's eventually how I got the job as a visual effects executive. But it was not a linear process. I had to take several steps back at every moment in time. So, you know, I think it's just showing that if you want to have, you know, kind of, I'd use that term, diverse career, you know, you have the ability to do that if you're willing to take certain steps that sometimes might take you back, but will take you then back into a different direction, and you're going to grow I had no idea when I started as an artist that I would, you know, become an executive at a major studio. But that's the path that it kind of took me. But because I took certain left and right turns at certain moments, just as a.
And I think each one of us have done that as well. You know, I mean, I have an engineering degree and a film degree. There wasn't work in animation when I got out of film school. So I worked in advertising and did a lot of live action, a lot of special effects, as well as visual effects. And I got into animated features through visual effects before I ended up at Disney. So there are so many different paths, but I think it is really about passion and love for the medium, the craft. I think, you know, if you don't love our medium, the craft, I think it can become thankless, because I've seen production people not make it through because they don't love the craft and the medium. So, you know, this is, you know, like working live action. I mean, it's hard work. It is hard work, and you got to be relentless. And, you know, but we do this because we love the craft and the medium.
It is really hard. And I would just say that I like Jinko was just saying, my degree was in international marketing. I thought I was going to travel the world, which I have done, luckily, but I thought I would do that for work because I love other people's cultures. And it was, you know, but I also, my mother's an artist, and I did art when I was young, and I watched so many cartoons. I mean, like, I was a freak. When I was young, there was no Cartoon Network. So you were watching, you know, there was no cable. You're watching regular TV channels, you know, and I just loved it. But it never occurred to me that I could have a career in it until my mother actually married a man who's an amazing background painter, and he got hired at Disney on The Little Mermaid. And then it was kind of like a light bulb, and I was like, wait, you can actually work on these films? Like, it just didn't occur to me. And so I started as a PA on Pocahontas, and just, you know, definitely it was a huge learning curve, you know, just learning 2D. And then when 3D came, people were like, oh, you're a 2D person, you won't understand CG. And then it's like, no, I got it. One film, Chicken Little. Okay, I'm good. You know, and then I learned stereoscopic filmmaking. And then it was the same thing when I went to live action. I think the thing that I want to say to people who are watching is don't let executives dictate what you can learn and what you can't, because we all know, those of us who work like boots on the ground, we know that once you see it and if you're savvy and quick, you'll get it. I mean, I basically was told that by a cinematographer, a very famous one actually, who worked on Home Alone, and I love him. And he basically told my partner, who had not directed a live action film, he was like, don't worry, after a few days, a few weeks, and definitely after one movie, you will get it. And you can see that, because when you understand filmmaking, even if you're coming from animation, you get on set, you see all the departments, everybody knows their jobs, you get it, one film, you know, especially if you have a film that has visual effects, stunts, animals, and children, you really get it pretty quick, because those are the hard things, right?
I, for example, same as Jinko, I'm coming from engineering, went over scripted reality TV and reality TV. So I was story producer on 2 seasons of Big Brother back in Germany. So very reality TV, and then went to film school and decided, okay, let's do something artistic. Let's be something. And then I realized, oh, there's this producing. That sounds interesting. Let's look into that. So I started literally as a producer within the industry, coming as a story producer from Endemol with an engineering background, because the skills were so transferable. Scientific thinking helps. Producing a daily format, a weekly format helps, because ultimately there's nothing worse when you're basically playing a show live from the editing room, right? Happened, shouldn't, but similar things happen in visual effects as well. You get calls from Arnon and his colleagues telling you, hey, we really need to get this temp delivery done for a recruited audience screening, and suddenly you're back in the editing room figuring out.
I never say that, Philip.
Figuring out how to play the shots back without sending them. So there's so many situations which are the same. They just speak a different language.
Great. So we do have another question here that's interesting. What about, and Arnon, you might be able to speak to this because this was your journey. Any advice for artists who are trying to switch from being on the artist side of thing, either in animation or visual effects, to moving into production? Is there bias, or how would?
I don't think I saw that question. I don't think there is bias. I think like anything else, you just have to do it. You know, I think the big thing is nobody's going to wait for you to make that transition. You know, I can speak for myself. I was an artist and I, produced, things, and I didn't know how to do it. You just do. You kind of jump into it, and you can start small by doing, make a short film with your friends, or you can actually make a transition. If you're talking about, from being a visual effects artist or animation artist to being a production personnel, in animation or visual effects, that's a lot easier. If you're working for a facility or a studio, if you know people, just ask. Again, you might have to and probably will have to take a slight step down or certainly sideways, but you're gonna have to learn that. But if you're already in there and you know the process, I think it's totally transferable. It's just a matter of how much you want it. I don't think there's a bias, is the short word.
I would interject and say that it's more about the individual than it is anything else, because there's a lot of people who go to art school, and while they're doing it, or film school, realize they don't want to be a director or an artist. They actually love the facilitating and managing part, and they're really good at it, and they love lists, and they're organized. So what I would say is to anyone who's an artist right now who thinks they want to be in production, if you don't like taking notes and being really on top of stuff and organized and multitasking, there's like a we call it the gene. There's a production gene. You know when someone has it. I've hired a lot of production people in my over 25 years of experience. And I always knew when somebody came on, you give them a shot and it wasn't working. And it was because they didn't have that gene, we call it. It's not really a gene, but they didn't have the ability to pay attention to you had to be very detail oriented. Not that you don't as an artist, but there's some artists that are like my mother. I'll use my mom as an example. She's an amazing artist, painter. She was a teacher, but she's very eccentric. And I had to do the taxes and balance the checkbooks. Like that wasn't in her. So if so you really have to be able to have that whole like left-right brain. I'm not really sure which is which, but you have to have a little bit of that to be successful in production management. Just like there's some people who are born amazing artists and others that can learn it. But if you don't really feel it in your soul, it's not going to be authentic. It's the same with production management.
How is important is people skills?
Very.
That's essential. That's
Essential.
so essential because it
You're
is
leading
managing
it.
people, right? We're
I would
working with the artist.
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
People really have to understand emotional intelligence, tact, when to speak, when not to, politics. I didn't have any of that when I started. And I really got my butt kind of handed to me at Disney because I was raised by parents who didn't work for companies. They own their own businesses. And so it was like, you just share what you think. And you thought, oh, okay. Poor Jinko. I wish I had known Jinko. She would have probably been like, okay, Monica. Not everybody.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, sorry, I'm going to be a little blunt about this. I just think people don't like working with assholes. So first of all, be nice, be a human being, I mean, I think actually it's becoming, less and less acceptable. I don't know if it's, maybe the last year specifically, but I think it's changed people's perception where people aren't willing to accept assholes, for lack of a better word, or kind of crummy people are working with, I know a lot of people, even on the visual effects side, VFX producers and supervisors who, I might reach out and say, hey, I have this project, like who's the director and producer? I'm like, oh, no, I'm not, so choosing the project is very important. And I think that's the big thing is if you are, even if you don't have the experience, even if you are doing the transferable skill, whether it's from live action to visual effects or animation, or even from an artist to a production, in some form, if you have the willingness, the aptitude, and you're willing to work with people and you're not an asshole, I think you have a really good opportunity here. But that's the big thing, just, learn, take advice, there's a lot of people around you that I'm sure can help and anybody here, if again, I would say that we should build some sort of, I don't know if it's a curriculum, but I've been thinking about it through this whole panel about doing something specifically for PGA members and actually being a little bit more specific about the transferable skills, not in the kind of generic way that we've been talking about it now. How can we really help doing a little seminar or something? I don't know what it is, but we'll get our heads around it.
And when you
Oh, so go ahead. Sorry.
and when you're dealing with people, empathy is obviously a very important thing as well. And especially if we're working with big teams within a vendor, you have so many different characters. You have so many different ways you need to communicate to people. Sometimes a person understands a mail. Sometimes a mail gets misunderstood. Who knows? Sometimes you need to be a little bit harsh to get what you need. But it's really about empathy. Where's this person coming from? Why do I need to talk to this person like that? And then you start understanding where this person is coming from, and then you can actually work together. And this animators, I think, perfect example, because animators are ultimately actors, but they also have to be very, very, very technical, because they have to actually animate that, and they have to understand what they're doing, and even crazier, they have to understand what their actions is going to do to the departments after them. What does it do for the people who are simulating the cloth on top of the animation, the effects, because the character is punching a hole through a wall. So the animator needs to understand that. So it's an acting job, a highly creative actor job, and a highly technical job, understanding what happens with what I'm doing and how to use this whole stuff.
And
It's
they're
crazy.
like, and they have to show their work. It's like, no offense, but it's like they're pulling down their pants in front of everyone. I mean, that's how it is that you in these review sessions, you know, you're on set and you may feel like there's a lot of people watching, but you can clear a set, you know, if you need to for certain things, but you're like creating something from deep down inside you from nothing, like blank page in the computer, right? You might have a layout and some, you know, pose to give you an idea of what you're supposed to be doing, but they are, you know, so yeah, you have to have a lot of respect for the art. I always say, if you're going to do animation, and at the end of the day, we never know if our films are going to be successful or not. It's all about the journey, and it's a long journey. So you have to really like the team you're working with. To Arnon's point, you can't be an asshole. There's
Yes.
so
Without
many,
empathy, that doesn't
Yeah.
work.
there's
And
so
I
many-
would say, in addition to Philip's comment about empathy, I think, you know, what's very important today, especially today, because because we are becoming more global, is that to keep in mind that you have to be inclusive. And
yes,
so as a leader, you need to understand that we are working with all kinds of people from everywhere. And it's important that production people can create a community within the show or their department, inclusive community, because without that, you're not going to get your team to row and get behind to get the work done. And when I say about inclusiveness, you know, we got to look at gender, we got to look at race, we got to look at sexuality, all of that. Everything is important to create that inclusive workplace.
So just to recap, attention to detail, organizational skills, people skills, management skills, and good communication skills are what you look for. Is there any other skill set that really makes somebody stand out?
oh,
Problem
yeah.
solving,
I was gonna
be
say,
able to be proactive, to see problems coming and be a good problem solver. I think good production person also is a multitasker.
I
and
actually have a
know
little,
how to prioritize.
I have a little document of like traits of a great production person. I will put it in the chat real quick. I'll just put them in there too. It helps so people can look at it. Well, because I know there's like 32 questions, and I was thinking maybe we should try to do like a speed answer. So we try to get to some of them instead of, you know, like as quickly as possible.
Right. We can do
Yeah,
that.
I think the problem solving, but it's interesting. I worked years ago with a visual effect when I was still an artist. I was a CG supervisor at the time, and I worked with a production manager on a visual effects show, and I was always really amazed at her organization skills, or what I used to call her, like, you know, the crystal ball, because we used to be in meetings with, you know, the producers and the supervisors and kind of the leads and us as the CG supervisors, and talk about certain things that come up, and it would be like somebody would say, hey, we need to do this, and she would be like, oh, here, look, I already have this, you know, whatever it is, you know, she was thinking 5 steps ahead.
Yes. I call that people, someone who can like almost read your mind. You see them looking around. This is why I knew a great PA, right? You see them looking around and they're looking and you're like, garbage, tissue, you know?
Right. But this was obviously, yeah, but her mindset was she could, and she was incredible and she still is incredible, but she could anticipate what the issues were before those issues were even came about, because the reality is, you know, if you've done this long enough, the same issues come up again and again and again, just in different forms, right? We've all done X amount of movies, and again, whether it's live action or animation or visual effects, you know, the same problems are the same problems. They just come up in different capacities, or by different people, or, you know, with a different in a different setting. So if you know that those problems are going to arise and you can anticipate them ahead of time, that will make you invaluable, not just employable, but invaluable, if you have that capacity. And that comes from, obviously, from experience of being on productions.
Yeah. So we can do a quick round robin with these questions. Okay. So I'll just throw it out, and I'll just let one of you answer, whoever wants to go first, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay. Okay. Do you have any advice on how to communicate with artists or even other production members whose communication is just terrible?
Yeah, but that's a big question.
Be honest, be empathetic, and be honest, and give them feedback.
Yeah.
And do it in private. Don't do it in the group.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Good.
Not in an email. Email will be misconstrued.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
do it in person, do it in person, in private, and definitely try to give them an example of, without being defensive about it, about how maybe they could have rephrased it.
How do the pay scales, are they different for live action producers to that of animation and visual effects producers?
Yes.
Likely, yes.
Definitely.
Which way does that go? Animation, visual effects, and live action?
I think live action might be the highest paid, then animation, then maybe visual effects. I would guess.
But that's at the higher level. You know,
I'm
if you're
talking about
talking
the
about
high-
production personnel, I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that.
I,
But
well, you know, again, if you look at union, non-union, I think it's a fairly complex answer. So I don't think we can answer this in 2 minutes, but I would say in general, union live action film producers make far more money than an
Both.
animated feature producer.
And visual effects. And I don't mean to say that visual effects producers can't make the same as animation producers, but it's a little bit different as well. So yeah, that's what makes it hard.
Okay, next one. I'm asking for my college-age daughter who studied animation a little bit, wants to get more hands-on experience. She's going to check out Rise Up and WI mentorships for sure. Where else would you suggest a newbie like her start?
There are a lot of programs for young people to do internships and stuff. So I would go online as well and do a search in your area, because they tend to have them kind of all over. That is, again, if you're in the United States. I can't speak for international. That's sometimes harder, but there's a lot of online stuff.
Okay.
yeah, and
And
I would
apply
say
for PA positions. Apply for PA positions. That's the easiest way to learn to see if this is something you want to do.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. For someone coming out of a break and trying to get back into the industry, where would you recommend to start? I think you kind of answered that.
I
Start
think
at the bottom of the
I
work.
would say the answer is the same thing as if you're doing, you know, if you're moving from one segment of the industry to another. You know, the fact that you've taken a break doesn't take away from the experience that you've had and the knowledge that you have. So I think you just have to make sure that that stands out in your resume or when you're applying for certain jobs. That, you know, life sometimes takes you in another direction. It doesn't preclude you from being employable, in my opinion.
Not at all. I would just say that those people who have taken a step, let's say, out for a while, and if it's changed dramatically, like when you stepped out and it was 2D animation, now it's CG, it doesn't mean you can't come back in, but you may not be able to come back in exactly the role you were at. You might need to come in like a little bit lower, or just to observe kind of how it's changed, and then your money, you know, if you're great, you're going to get promoted.
Okay, great. Is it harder for women to crack animation or visual effects as producers than men?
Shouldn't be, but there's still a.
I would say
Yeah,
in visual effects, not really. Most of our management personnel are women, at least in Montreal.
Your
And,
producers or lower level. We're talking about
No,
producers.
producers, executive producers, general managers, MDs. So there definitely we have a lot of women in production. It's on the artist side where it's unfortunately not as high representation.
Yeah, and on the production side, visual effects producers, I would say, I don't know if it's exactly equal, but it's very close with high-end visual effects producers, men and women.
How about animation?
I would say in the feature world, we're probably at parity at the producing level, but you know, it's taken us a long time.
Yeah, I mean, Jinko, we're not quite at parity though.
Yeah, maybe lower, but
I mean,
I think.
And I'm talking about the highest level. I'm not talking about production management, because that
Yeah.
has always been notoriously female, because people thought females are more organized than males. And so we
Yeah.
spent a lot of time trying to bring in
There's
males.
that ceiling at production manager or
Yeah,
associate
so-
producer. I think the
Right,
bigger
it's
issue for
more
me
males.
is bringing in people of color into the producing positions.
But I also think there's a lot of room still to go for females. So nice to hear about visual effects, not quite where we should be yet in animation, honestly, but there's a lot of people in production management. That's very different than the highest level, right? And Philip is right. In artistry area, that's where we have less females.
Right.
And I'm just seeing in the chat, yes, female visual effects supervisors is something which is you can barely count
Yeah.
them on two hands, and that's
That's
it.
what I'm
That-
talking about.
that is-
That is a big problem.
That is a
But there,
big
for
problem.
example, government programs in Montreal, for example, at the moment has a program to promote female leadership in visual effects. So they're literally doing mentorship programs, leadership trainings for aspiring women in visual effects to get up to this level.
Okay. So some of these are a little bit redundant, so I'm trying to go through and
Looks like
okay,
we have time for one more, says Jamie.
just one more. So where's the what are the best companies to look for? Where are the opportunities right now in animation and visual effects? Is it feature films? Streaming?
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Okay.
I mean, I literally have a list of like 300 companies that I send out to mentees when they're interested in career sites. There's so many all over the world and domestic, here domestically.
This is
Where-
one important advice that I give to artists, but I will give it to production people as well is, you may want to work at a Pixar or Disney or DreamWorks or Sony. Just because you can't get a job there doesn't mean there isn't a job.
That's
There's
right.
jobs everywhere in animation and visual effects. So, you may want to work at those top tier companies, but if that's not where where you can't get a job, you should not give up. If you're really passionate, you can get a job. So,
And start closer to home, right? There's some people too in international, in other countries, they're like, I can't get into the US. And I'm like, well, just start somewhere close to home, gaming, whatever it is, get some experience and then continue to move up. And then you can go to Canada or the US, right? I mean, what do you guys think?
And
Right?
we actually, and just so Lisa, I'm not sure if this has reached your high chair in the Visual Effects Society yet, but we are putting together from the Education Committee a resource list that we will want to put up on the Visual Effects Society website, which hopefully will be open to everybody. But yeah, we'll talk to you about that. We're putting that together.
That's great. Yeah, because where do people go to find this information out? That was going to be my next question. What are the resources available? But
It's your Glassdoors, your JobVite, your job portals of the world is where you find. I think the VS website also has a third-party job page.
LinkedIn,
You can look
you
at
know.
I was gonna say,
LinkedIn. Actually,
LinkedIn.
yes.
we
There's
have puts out a job board every week. We
It's-
list all the jobs that are listed.
great.
Yeah, we as if you can sign up for that Women in Animation, it's amazing. I just want to say. And the other thing is there's some new stuff coming out for jobs. So in addition to LinkedIn, there's a new thing called Creatively that's starting. And there's another one that's like, I can't think of the name of it, but it's something like job search, or something kind of like that, where people are putting, there's a lot of job boards as well. So yeah, I would just do some searching on the internet. You'll find them.
So we have about 4 minutes left. I think I'm just going to ask you any final words of advice to people who are looking to switch over to a new area of production or get into animation or visual effects.
I would
Be
say,
passionate and be persistent.
And be open to change.
yeah, and I would say I would just really go to what Jinko was saying about liking, or wanting to engage in animation and visual effects, because it might seem like a nice option. Like, well, I've been working on the live action side for a while, or for some reason, live action has slowed down and I can't, find a job. I'll move into visual effects and animation. If you don't love it, it's hard work. There's long hours. It's very rewarding if you love it. And there are a lot of employment opportunities, and you can have a great career and certainly rise up the ranks because there is a lot of opportunities, but you really have to love it. If you don't love it, like anything, it can be really painful.
Yeah, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It is. It's beautiful
Sometimes it's multiple sprints in a marathon.
I do
Chris
think-
Edwards, I'll make a shout out, from the third floor. They're hiring.
So, and Chris Edwards didn't even say hi. He doesn't even remember me. I remember when he was like on Treasure Planet. He was like our only previs dude before he started his company. I loved him.
And Chris was my intern.
I think we should do something like this where we just do a Q&A where we sit here one day and just let everybody ask questions. Because I think people have so many questions. There's so much that they don't know about animation and visual effects.
There is one PGA question I wanted to just throw out there. Can live action unscripted producers join the animation and visual effects groups within the guild?
Yes.
I'm sorry. PGA? Yeah, absolutely. They have new media, scripted, unscripted, and you can be a coordinator or a production supervisor or a production management. You can get into the PGA as what they call, it's not the producer program, but it's like AP council, associate producer council. So there's a lot of opportunities. So you should definitely apply, because we do want to get more people in the PGA. That's a huge piece of why we're doing this, but especially diverse. So we're looking for, you know, all of those areas that are unrepresented.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's it. We're at 4:59 and 30 seconds. Thank you, guys. This has been an amazing conversation. So much information, and I'm just getting all kinds of exclamations.
Went by really quickly.
It did. I feel like we could have gone another hour just to get through the questions. But great information, and oh my gosh, incredible. Thank you. Oh my gosh, keep going, keep going. One more hour.
I see lots of horsemen. Hello.
So we'll have to do it again. But anyhow, thank you everybody, and thanks to the PGA for putting this on.
And thank you, Lisa, for doing this.
One last thing I would say, you know, if there's questions that we didn't answer, because I know there was a whole bunch of questions. I don't know if the PGA or somebody can take those questions and send them to us. I'll be happy to try and answer some of them via email, and you guys can put them up somewhere if we haven't answered them. If somebody can take us.
Many of them you guys just answered naturally within your conversation, so that was good. But yeah, there are a few that specifics like tax incentives and things that people might want to know about. So
okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks
you
again,
so much.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for doing this. Bye.
And thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Philippe, and thank you, PGA.
Thank you, PGA. Thank you, Lisa, everyone.
Okay, I don't know. I guess we just leave.
Yeah, I just wanted to, everybody's great. I just wanted to, I actually can't start my camera for some reason. I think I need Diana to do that. But I just wanted to thank you, Lisa, and then thank everybody on the panel, Philip, Monica, Jinko, and Arnon. You guys were terrific. And on the behalf of the Employment Committee, we just wanted to thank the Producers Guild for hosting this, along with co-hosts, the Visual Effects Society, Women in Animation, and Rise Up Animation. And we're leaving some links in the chat for you to find more information. If you'd like to become a co-host for a future event for the Employment Committee, or just get involved with the PGA, please email Jamie or myself, and we've left our emails in the chat as well. So appreciate everybody sticking with and doing this. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Save the chat, everyone.
Okay, bye.